Hello dear students, welcome back. Today we will be studying relative clauses. Actually, we have studied this topic before in level B1, but we have some more details to talk about in B2. So, our main goal using relative clause is to actually shorten sentences that we use. For example, for instance, we have two sentences that has a common feature of speech, and we combine them and make a shorter sentence. For example, Ali is an undergraduate student. He aims to become a doctor. For example, in this sentence, what we have in common is our subject of the sentences, which is Ali in this case. Here we have a pronoun referring to Ali in this sentence. We don't have to use necessarily this long sentence to describe or give the same meaning. We can shorten it and gather them in one sentence, which can sound and understand better. When we are using relative clause, we have some relative pronouns, as you may remember, which are that, who, whose, which, when, where, whom. We use these relative pronouns to shorten our sentences and combine them, which have a common figure of speech. So, how do we shorten them, and where do I use these relative pronouns in each sentence? For example, we have where. This is a relative pronoun that we confuse the most, but actually we have a pretty simple rule that we can remember and keep in mind, which is defining places. We will get to that when we want to shorten the time expression. We have which we can use for objects, animals, things. We have who to define people. We have that, which is pretty similar to which, and we use this one for both people and objects. And we also have an extra one in B2 level, whom, which we use to omit the to person. What is this? We talked about this in A2, I guess, and our rule was object pronouns. For example, when we're talking about whose, we're talking about possessive adjectives, possessive pronouns, and when we're talking about whom, we're talking about object pronouns to shorten them. So, this is a bit complicated. I will do a better scheme, but this is practically how do we use it. So, let's start with their uses. We said that we use that relative pronoun to define objects and people. We use which relative pronoun to define objects, animals, things, etc. Who, it is an obvious one. We use who to define or shorten the sentences. People, whose possessive adjectives or pronouns. We have whom, which we use for objects, pronouns. We have where to define places, and when to define time or time expressions. So this is basically how do we use them. Now let's examine them one by one. We have first that. Let's start with an easy example. The dog is, or the dog has, pretty fur. It is a baby, or it is a puppy. Okay, what is the common thing in these two sentences is the dog. We have a common figure of speech in these two sentences. And I want to use relative pronoun that to combine them. I will start with writing my first sentence. And when I get to the point where I have the common figure of speech, I stop and use my appropriate relative pronoun, which can be that. Or, in this case, it can also be which. Now, I go to the second sentence. Is a puppy. And then, once this is completed, I go on again with my first sentence. As you can see, I omitted the second common figure of speech because our already main goal is to omit that thing, the common thing, not to repeat it. So I omit it and then continue my sentence. What do we do here? We gave an extra information in between our main sentence. Now, it depends on what is your main purpose of creating this sentence. If your main purpose is to highlight that has pretty fur, you can put that one after the second sentence. But if you want to highlight that dog being a puppy, you could also write this sentence, use this sentence like this. The dog that has pretty fur is a puppy. So, what I can understand from here is that the extra information should come after our relative pronoun. Let's write down a note. The extra information should come right after the relative pronoun. But this one applies for that, which, and who. Because the other relative pronouns, we have something different to do with whose, with whom, where, and when. We have something different with them, and we will get to that. Our school has good-looking uniforms. It is an old high school. So, the first thing we should do is to determine the thing that is the same in these two sentences. I'm looking here. Our school has good-looking uniforms. It is an old high school. So, in the second sentence, we have it as our subject, and it refers to our school in the first sentence. So I understand that I am going to combine or put relative pronoun right after our school. I start writing my normal first sentence. And then, since this is the common thing, I am either going to use that or which. Both is correct here. Our school, that. Now, it depends on which sentence we're going to keep going, depends on which is the main purpose of telling this sentence, and which is the extra information. If my extra information is that our school has good-looking uniforms, I'm going to put it right here. But let's say that my extra information was that it is an old high school. I would put it right here instead of this one. And now I continue with the second sentence. Is I omitted the same subject is an old high school. Let's do the reverse one. Our school, which again, or that, is an old high school, has good-looking uniforms. So let's continue with more examples. My garage is quite narrow. It needs to be repaired. Let's have a look at this one. Again, the first thing we are going to do is to find the common figure of speech in these two sentences. And in this particular example, as you can see, it is my garage. In the second sentence, it, subject it, refers to my garage in the first sentence. So again, I will start with the subject of the first sentence. My garage, again, it depends on which is the extra information you want to deliver. I will go with the first sentence. My garage, which or that, is quite narrow, needs to be repaired. So I put a relative pronoun right after what I'm defining, which is the most important thing actually when it comes to relative clause. And then I continue with our verb, quite narrow, needs to be repaired. And then when I want to continue with the other sentence, I put the verb of that sentence and continue the rest of it. There is a new exhibition in town. We would like to see it very much. Now, in this one, I don't have the same figure of speech in the subject position, but rather what is common is that an object. As you can see, there's a new exhibition in town. We would like to see it very much. In the second sentence, it refers to the new exhibition. So what I'm going to do here is I will start writing down my first sentence as it is. There's a new exhibition. So we have pointed out that we have to use relative pronoun right after what we're defining. That we would, and I continue with the second sentence. But this time I used the subject because, again, our common figure of speech is not in the subject position. We would like to see. Now I omit it from the second sentence very much. So what we have learned is it doesn't necessarily have to be the subject or the object of the sentence. It depends on the sentence or example we're talking about. My fiancé hired a new employee. Or let's say that my fiancé built a new office in the city center. It is pretty crowded. So, as you can see in the second sentence, it doesn't refer to my fiancé in the first sentence, but it refers to the new office. So, let's start writing it. My fiancé built a new office. Now, I've come across the common figure of speech. And I'm going to put my relative pronoun right after it. A new office, which, or that, again, both is correct and fine, which is pretty crowded, is in the city center. Now, this is a complex one, and I want to give the details of it because in here you don't see is, but in the relative close sentence we built, we have an is. And why is that? Because in the first sentence we have actually two informations. My fiancé built a new office. This is our first information. And the second one is that the office is in the city center. Even though there is not an is related with its being in the city center, we have to put that information in the new sentence that we have created. Because otherwise, the information would be not complete. So I started with our regular sentence. My fiancé built a new office. Right after it, I put the relative pronoun, the correct, appropriate relative pronoun. And then I went on with the second sentence. It's pretty crowded. We don't have a problem till here. And then I went back to the first sentence, and I have to give this information also. So I added a be form because I have to give that information, and added that one. But let's say that I want the extra information to be the other sentence. I would write it like this. Let's clean here. My fiancé built an office which is in the city center. Then I would go on with the other sentence, is in the city center, is pretty crowded. Okay, so let's write down a note. Relative pronoun should come right after what you are defining / the common figure of speech. Because otherwise the meaning would be completely something different. Okay, let's see that and which from the beginning. We said that we use that with people or objects and things. The dog has pretty fur. It is a puppy. The common thing, the same thing in these two sentences is the dog. So I started my sentence with the common one and then added the correct relative pronoun and went on with what is the extra information I decided to be. After I gave that one, I gave the main purpose of the sentence. But it depends on what your aim is to tell. So we have wrote down a road. Our school has good-looking uniforms. It is an old high school. Again, it depends. What is your main purpose? What is your extra information? Our school that has good-looking uniforms. In this example, I wanted this information to be the extra one, and then went on with the other sentence. My garage is quite narrow. It needs to be repaired. My garage, which or that, both is correct in this one, is quite narrow, and then comma, needs to be repaired. There's a new exhibition in town. We would like to see it very much. Okay, we have forgotten something in this example. As you can see, there's a new exhibition. And the missing information is that it is in town. So how are we going to add this to the sentence? Till here, it's fine. I added my relative pronoun and went on with the other sentence. But after this one, I should get back to the first sentence information, which is in town. To see very much is in town. So again, like the other example we have given, we have to add a be form in harmony with our tense and our subjects. My fiancé built an office. It is in the city center. Sorry, my fiancé built an office in the city center. It is pretty crowded was our original sentence, 2 sentences. So we started with my fiancé built a new office and then relative pronoun, which or that is pretty crowded, is in the city center. And we have, that is very important, because otherwise the meaning would be something completely different. Relative pronouns should come right after what you're defining or the common figure of speech, as we have studied in our examples. As you can see here, which or that came right after the thing that we're defining. So let's go on with who. Relative pronoun who. In this one, we're defining people. So, my gym instructor is quite young. She is experienced. Let's start with an easy example. Now in here, as you can see, the same thing that we have used in the both sentences is that our subjects, my gym instructor, and in the second sentence, she refers to my gym instructor in the first sentence. So I will start with a subject of the first sentence. And then I have to use the appropriate relative pronoun, which can be who. Okay, now what are you going to go on with depends on what is the extra information that you would like to give. Who is quite young. Then I jump into the second sentence. I omit the thing that we have used is experienced. Or if my main purpose of telling this sentence was the otherwise, I could say my gym instructor, who is experienced, is young, is quite young. So again, it changes from time to time what you are willing to tell with these examples. My nephew goes to kindergarten and the second sentence is he is, let's say, 5 years old. Okay, again, we have the same subjects in both of the sentences. So I will start with my nephew. I will use who as my relative pronoun right after the subject. Who is 5 years old, goes to kindergarten. Again, it could be the otherwise. My nephew, who goes to kindergarten, is 5 years old. So, as you can see, it can change when we're using relative pronouns such as who, which, that. Let's talk about whose. In this one, we're talking about possessive adjectives or pronouns. So we have two sentences that has something in common, but one of the sentences should have the meaning of possessing something. Let's start with an easy example. She's my doctor. Her certificate is from Oxford, let's say. So as you can see, in one of the sentences, we have a possessive adjective. And one of them is a normal subject. So I will start with, actually, let's have a name here. Ayşe. Ayşe. And right after that, as we have studied so far, I have to use the relative pronoun, whose certificate is from Oxford. Now I go back to the first sentence, is my doctor. As I have said, we have something different with whose, when, where, and whom. I cannot change the places of these sentences because only one of these sentences has the meaning of possession. So I cannot say anything like Ayşe's certificate is, or etc. My mother cooks delicious pasta. Her recipe book is pretty good. So again, my mother and her. Her here means my mother's. I will start with my mother and then relative pronoun, which in this case is whose. Recipe book is pretty good. Cooks delicious pasta. Again, I cannot change the places of these sentences like we did with that's, which, and who. The president is traveling to, let's say, Alaska. His family is also going with him. I have a possessive adjective in the second sentence, and my subject is the president. The president whose family is also going with him is traveling to Alaska. The president whose family is also going with him is traveling to Alaska. I am an English teacher in London Bridge, for example. My students are hardworking. Okay, let's have a look at here. In the second sentence, again, I have a possessive adjective, and in the first sentence, I have a subject. I will start with, or let's change here. İrem, whose students are hardworking, is an English teacher in London Bridge. Okay, let's review who and whose. We said that we define people when we are using relative pronoun who. My gym instructor is quite young. She is experienced. My gym instructor, who is quite young, is experienced. Or I can say my gym instructor, who is experienced, is young. My nephew goes to kindergarten. He is 5 years old. My nephew, who is 5 years old, goes to kindergarten. My nephew, who goes to kindergarten, is 5 years old. It depends on what is your main focus? And your main focus should be at the end of the sentence, not right after our relative pronoun. Then we have jumped into a relative pronoun whose. Aisha is my doctor, her certificate is from Oxford. Aisha, and then I have to put right after our relative pronoun, and then I have to continue with the sentence which has the possessive adjective. Whose certificate is from Oxford is my doctor, but I cannot change the places of these sentences. My mother cooks delicious pasta. Her recipe book is pretty good. And now I have again a possessive adjective. My mother, and then I put the relative pronoun, the correct one. Recipe book is pretty good. Cooks delicious pasta. The president is traveling to Alaska. His family is also going with him. The president, right after I put whose, the relative pronoun, family is also going with him, is traveling to Alaska. Then, one more example. Iram is an English teacher in London Bridge. Her students are hardworking. Iram, whose students are hardworking, is an English teacher in London Bridge. My sister is getting married this summer. Her fiancé is an engineer. So, as you can see, I have my possessive adjective here. I will start with my sister, whose fiancé is an engineer. Is getting married this summer. You have to keep going with the sentence that has relative possessive adjective right after our relative pronoun. My house has a big garden. Its flowers are blooming. And this time, what I have here is that I'm defining the big garden. My house has a big garden whose flowers are blooming. So, this time, the thing that I'm defining and the object that has a possessive meaning is not in the subject position. My house has a big garden whose flowers are blooming. So what we understand from here is that actually we don't only use whose with people. I can also talk about what the objects or things have. Our neighbor's dog is a golden retriever. is a golden, let's say. Its fur is blonde. So don't let our deceive you, because it's here referred to dog in the first sentence. Our neighbor's dog, whose fur is blonde, is a golden. And now we have where. We are going to define places. We are going to give extra information about the places, or we are going to combine sentences that has place meaning. But I'm not talking about in the subject position, but we're talking about literally the place meaning. We have subject, verb, object, place, and time as our sentence structure in English. What we're going to define here is this one. Even if we have a place name in our subject or in our object, doesn't matter, we're not going to turn them into a relative clause using where. It has to be in the place position. How are we going to understand that it gives us the place meaning? There are several ways for that. We can use prepositions. We can understand from prepositions. Or we can understand from there, here, etc. These are our clues. For example, let's say, Ankara hotel is pretty famous. We stayed there for 3 days. Now, in the second sentence, we have a place meaning. And how did I understand it? We have a there in the sentence. It could be a preposition, in, at, on, doesn't matter. But in this one, we have there. So, I will do the Ankara hotel, and then I will use my relative pronoun, which is where. And I am going to keep going with the second sentence because we have that place meaning in the second sentence, where we stayed for 3 days is pretty famous. So, in this one, I omitted there because the relative pronoun where already gives that meaning. So I don't have to use it anymore, and it would be wrong if I used it. The Ankara hotel, where we stayed for 3 days, is pretty famous. My cousin's room is messy I wouldn't want to sleep there. My cousin's room, where I wouldn't want to sleep, is messy. Again, I omitted there because the job of where is already to give that meaning. My cousin's room, where I wouldn't want to sleep, is messy. She cleaned the entire house. I come there and relax. She cleaned the entire house, where I come and relax. School is a place where students learn new things. Or home is a place where we live. Now, let's talk about when, relative pronoun. Now we are going to define our time in the sentence. But, for example, there's a big misconception about this times and places. People try to for example, if there is a time in the subject position or in the object position, they try to also use that in relative clause using when. But no, what we're going to do is we need a time expression. And how are we going to differ from this position to this position? We have some clues that can help you understand better. For example, prepositions, time prepositions. These are gonna help us, or you can look at the position in the sentence of that time. For example, 2014 was the year when I got married. Or, I love summer. You can go to the beach in summer. Look at the second example. We have a time preposition here. So I'm going to rewrite this sentence using when. I love summer when you can go to beach. But But in the second sentence, I don't repeat the time expression. $20,000 were tough years. Economy was awful during 2000s. So as you can see, we have a common thing in these two sentences, which is 2000s. I start my sentence 2000s when my relative pronoun, when economy was awful, were tough years. So as you can see, we define the time using when. Let's do a quick review of whose and where. Okay, we talked about the place. We need a place meaning in our sentence. The Anchor Hotel is pretty famous. We stayed there for 3 days. Again, we have some clues. I can have a preposition that indicates place, or there and here. I am going to use where right after our common figure of speech, and then I am going to continue with the sentence that has that there, here, or place preposition. The Anchor Hotel, where we stayed for 3 days, and then I omit the preposition or there, here, is pretty famous. My cousin's room is messy. I wouldn't want to sleep there. My cousin's room, where I wouldn't want to sleep, is messy. She cleaned the entire house. I come there and relax. Again, you can see a there use in the second sentence. She cleaned the entire house where I come and relax. I have to use relative pronoun right after what I'm defining, and I have to continue with the sentence that has that place meaning which you can understand with prepositions or here and there. School is a place where students learn new things. Here is a perfect example of use where in relative clause. Home is a place where we live. Then we talked about when. I love summer. You can go to beach in summer. I love summer when you can go to beach. 2000s were tough years. Economy was awful during 2000s. Again, I did my sentence. I started with the common figure of speech, 2000s, and right after that I used the correct relative pronoun and continued my sentence with the meaning of time. Economy was awful, were tough years. Thank you for joining today with our lesson. I hope you understood and enjoyed it. We're not completely finished because we have whom as well, and we are going to continue with more examples in our next lesson. Take care of yourselves. See you on our next lesson.